Am I the antagonist for asking my parents to pay me to go to my sister's wedding? My 28-year-old male family and I are currently having a major disagreement regarding my sister's 30-year-old female wedding. Our conflict has become so severe that I have decided not to attend the wedding or go home for the holidays this year. Instead, I will be spending time with my girlfriend's family. This issue began 4 years ago when my sister got married, and I was heavily involved in the wedding preparations as a groomsman. Although I was never particularly close to my former brother-in-law, I thought he was a decent guy. However, in July of 2022, my sister and her ex-husband divorced due to her having an affair with her current fiancé. As always, my parents supported and excused my sister's actions. Since I live far away from home, I typically only visit once a year. Last Christmas when I was home, she introduced her new fiancé to our parents. They referred to him as her fiancé, even though it had only been 4 months since her divorce. I wasn't happy about it and avoided speaking to the guy, instead going for a walk most of the evening. Before leaving, the fiancé approached me and asked if I would consider being a groomsman. I promptly declined, explaining that I didn't know him, didn't want to spend the money, and most likely wouldn't attend the wedding. When my sister found out, she got angry with me, which led to a heated argument in front of our parents. I ended up questioning whether they planned to fund a second wedding in 3 years. They told me it wasn't my business. The argument escalated, and I left for New York earlier than planned. I turned down my sister's invitation to the wedding. Subsequently, her fiancé texted me, expressing how the family would be upset if I didn't attend. I didn't respond until he called, and at that point I told him to basically leave me alone. I had no intention of spending a significant amount of money on a wedding between cheaters. My parents informed me they were spending Christmas with the new in-laws to get to know them better. I found this amusing after they initially invited me, claiming it was fine if I couldn't make it since I would be attending the wedding in February. However, they hadn't been informed yet, and once they found out, they were furious. My mother in particular was upset, mentioning family photos and how others would ask about my absence at the wedding. I responded by stating that if they were willing to pay for my plane ticket, hotel, alcohol, and additional expenses, then I would go. Otherwise, I had no intention of attending. My dad said they would not cover my expenses to come. I then pointed out the irony of paying for a second wedding but refusing to pay for a plane ticket. This enraged my dad and he hung up. Over the past week, my mom has been texting me, attempting to convince me. I told her that she could handle all the questions and take her photos with her side of the family. Apart from my mom's texts, we haven't really spoken in months. I just want to know if I was the one in the wrong here. You are not necessarily the asshole for refusing to participate in your sister's wedding or spend the holidays with your family due to the circumstances surrounding her divorce and quick engagement. It seems understandable that you might be uncomfortable with the situation and have reservations about being involved in the wedding or being around your sister's new fiancé. However, it is important to consider how you have communicated your feelings and decisions to your family. Hateful or disrespectful comments directed towards your sister or her fiancé might not be the most constructive way to express your concerns. It is essential to maintain open communication and express your perspective without causing unnecessary conflict or hurting others. Additionally, it may be worth considering that your parents might be caught between their desire to support your sister and their love for you. It is possible that they are trying to find a compromise or balance, even if it doesn't meet your expectations. In conclusion, while your feelings about the situation are valid, it is important to approach the issue with sensitivity and respect for others' emotions. Am I the antagonist for refusing to help my wife with managing her debt? My name is John, 38 years old, and my wife, Jane, 42 years old, have been married for 18 years. Please note that these are not our real names. Jane recently obtained a credit card, but she keeps forgetting to make the payments. I have decided not to pay it because I'm tired of her continuously getting credit cards and then expecting me to monitor and pay them off. To provide some context, before our marriage, Jane had a habit of spending freely and accumulating a significant amount of debt, amounting to several $1,000s. Both Jane and I are hard workers and have been employed since we were 15 years old. Personally, I have always been diligent in saving my money, while Jane spends hers and sometimes goes beyond that. Money became an issue for us when we decided to get married, as Jane would frequently purchase unnecessary items and increase her debt. Our disagreements over this matter escalated to the point where we had a major argument in a store. Despite the financial strain, I loved Jane and ended up using all of my savings from my teenage years to pay off her debt. Since then, we have remained debt-free, except for our cars and house, primarily due to my efforts. Jane has no interest in managing our finances and is rather indifferent towards them. Consequently, I've taken charge of all our bank accounts, credit cards, and the like, including the ones she had prior to our marriage. Our financial arrangement functions as follows. I inform Jane about our available funds, and she is free to spend as she pleases. If we have insufficient funds, I let her know and she refrains from spending further. However, I keep track of every purchase she makes. I don't mind what she buys, but she is aware that I review the credit card statements to identify any fraudulent charges. Occasionally, if a purchase seems unusual, I may inquire about it, but I generally do not question her choices. This arrangement has worked well for us over the years. Around 10 years ago, I overheard a coworker, Rebecca, complaining openly about hiding money from her husband. I was taken aback when other women in our office confirmed that they did the same. Some even stated that their mothers advised them to do so because men tend to be controlling. That night, I discussed this with my wife, and she admitted feeling similarly about me, although she had never hidden money from me. We decided that she should have her own separate bank account into which regular deposits would be made, over which I would have no control or say. She offered the same to me, but I declined, since I can easily hide money from her given her disinterest in our finances. She has all the necessary information to access our accounts, and despite my attempts to explain our financial situation, she simply doesn't care. It's important to me that she is aware in case something happens to me, but she cannot be bothered. A couple of years ago, Jane resorted to her previous behavior of opening store credit cards. I wouldn't mind if it weren't for the fact that I am left to monitor and pay them off. Additionally, she uses them without informing me, making it difficult for me to keep track. I've asked her to refrain from obtaining more store credit cards, but she hasn't complied. The latest credit card she opened pushed me to my limit. I informed her that I would not pay it off, monitor it, or assist her with it. It has been a month since she obtained it, and she still hasn't figured out how to make the payments. I reminded her once, and she attempted to pay it but struggled to connect it to our bank account and eventually gave up. She asked me to handle it for her, but I declined. Am I the antagonist for refusing to assist my wife in managing her debt? You have been diligent in managing your finances and supporting your wife in paying off her previous debts. Despite offering her the same financial independence you have, she has chosen not to take that route and continues to accumulate debt by opening new credit cards. It seems like you have made an effort to communicate your concerns and boundaries, asking her to stop opening store credit cards, which she has ignored. While it can be argued that as a spouse you should support and help each other, it's also important for both partners to take responsibility for their own actions and financial decisions. It is not fair for you to bear the burden of managing and paying off her debts indefinitely, especially when she refuses to take responsibility for her own finances. However, it is worth having a serious conversation with your wife and seeking professional help to address the underlying issues. Financial irresponsibility can have long-term consequences for both of you, and it is essential to establish healthier financial habits and strategies as a couple. Am I the antagonist for telling my mom she never had control over what happened with me and her stepdaughter after she got married? I was 9 years old when my mom informed me that she was dating someone. She had me at a young age, so my aunt, her sister, took care of me along with my cousin. We were incredibly close, almost like siblings. There was a girl at school named Hannah who was pretty awful to everyone, including my cousin, although she did say some mean things to me occasionally. It wasn't as often or as severe as what she said to others. She used to make derogatory comments about my cousin's sexuality because most of his friends were girls. Initially, teachers dismissed it as her not understanding the impact of her words, but she knew exactly what she was saying. Hannah was always getting into trouble, and my aunt was called to the school multiple times to discuss incidents involving my cousin. Hannah's father was frequently involved because of her behavior. Hannah wasn't the only problem, as she had a friend who was even worse, and more was done to her. When I was 9, I found out that my mom started dating Hannah's dad, and they quickly moved us in together. They got married less than a year later, but Hannah's behavior did not change. I ended up spending less time with my aunt and cousin because my mom was upset that my aunt didn't include Hannah more. It felt like a punishment because my aunt had been more of a mother figure to me than my own mom. When Hannah was 13, her friend's family moved, and she never saw her again. After that, she started trying to get closer to me. I had always resented my mom for marrying Hannah's dad, and I never wanted to be close to Hannah. I disliked her then, and nothing has changed even though Hannah herself has changed and is no longer a bully. Hannah has been quite lonely over the past few years because most kids refuse to give her a chance, and those who do often ignore her once they realize how badly she used to treat others. My mom expected me to be Hannah's sister and friend, and this has caused many arguments between us. Now that I'm older, I spend time with my cousin and aunt, regardless of my mom's disapproval. She believes I should support Hannah as family and claims that I'm holding her childhood behavior against her too harshly. I told my mom that her marriage to Hannah's dad didn't grant her control over us. I expressed that I never want Hannah in my life, and I will only tolerate her presence to some extent. Nothing my mom says can change that. My mom thinks I'm behaving more maliciously than she ever expected and expressed her disappointment in me for saying those things. Am I the asshole? You have every right to choose who you want to have in your life. It's understandable that you have negative feelings towards Hannah due to her past behavior and the impact it had on your cousin. Your mom shouldn't try to force a relationship between you two if you're not comfortable with it. It's also important to consider your own well-being and mental health. If being around Hannah causes you distress or makes you unhappy, it's okay to set boundaries and prioritize your own happiness. Your mom should respect your feelings and not guilt trip you into accepting a relationship you're not comfortable with. Ultimately, it's your choice whether you want to have a relationship with Hannah or not, and your mom shouldn't try to dictate who you should or shouldn't have in your life. Am I the antagonist for telling my parents if they'd rather be right then they should leave me alone? My sister was 4 years old when I was born, and we were not close growing up. She resented me from a very early age and made her dislike of me quite clear. As a kid, it upset me a lot. She was my cooler older sister, and Gabrielle was so well liked by others that it made me crazy that she was so awful to me. Our extended family used to tell my parents that they had changed Gabrielle's life too much, and she was resentful of me because of the changes. But our parents would say Gabrielle was just a brat, and she would be thankful for a sister one day, and I would be the most important person in her life. My parents and Gabrielle fought a lot when I was a kid, and I remember them telling her she'd be sorry she rejected me, and that one day she would realize I am the most important person and relationship in her life. Gabrielle would tell them that the kid they replaced her with would never mean that much to her. My parents said she was overdramatic. They would also take me to do stuff that Gabrielle loved, and that they used to say was their thing with her. That used to upset her a lot and made her dislike for me grow. I'm 23 and Gabrielle is 27. For the last 3 years, our relationship has changed from being very cold and hostile to us getting along. Gabrielle apologized for how she treated me and said it was a shitty thing she did, taking her issues out on me that were really issues with our parents. I told her I understood. After we started getting along, our parents became so smug, and they gloated to Gabrielle that they were right and she was wrong. And look at us now, etc. Gabrielle would argue back, but they would hammer their point home. A few times they even brought up Gabrielle's past treatment of me around others, so they would know exactly how things used to be. Gabrielle grew frustrated, and over a year ago, she told our parents that they were not right about everything. That yeah, we were closer now, but I was not the most important person or relationship in her life. She said her most important relationship was the woman she loved more than anything, the woman she married, and they were wrong to think I would come before her wife. Our parents laughed in her face, told her she was still childish, and they were right. She went no contact that day. I went low contact after that, and I was disgusted by how they treated Gabrielle. They didn't like it, and recently they tried to talk to me during my cousin's quinceañera and find out why I was being so distant. During the same party, they were bringing up how silly Gabrielle was and how right they were, etc. So when they came back to me, I said if they only care about being right, then they should leave me alone because I did not credit them for Gabrielle and me working out our relationship. My parents were yelling and cursing and telling me I was disrespectful to them when Gabrielle was the one who treated me badly, and that I should be more respectful, etc. They really derailed the party. You are not the asshole in this situation. It's understandable that you would feel frustrated and upset about the way your parents treated your sister and how they continue to gloat about it. It's commendable that you recognized your sister's apology and were able to move forward in your relationship. Your parents, on the other hand, are clearly in the wrong. Their behavior towards your sister was disrespectful, and they continue to demean her. By standing up for yourself and distancing yourself from their toxic behavior, you are taking a stand against their mistreatment of your sister. Their attempts to guilt trip you and play the victim during the quinceañera show their lack of understanding and empathy. It's important to prioritize healthy relationships and respect boundaries. You did the right thing by defending yourself and your sister. Am I the antagonist? My boyfriend wants to repeatedly walk through details of people I slept with when I was single for my benefit. He says it's not about jealousy and that he doesn't want me to feel bad about it. He seems to think I'll learn more about myself by exploring things, especially my tendency to let feelings of guilt or shame around my sex life prevent me from talking about it directly, not indirectly. My religious upbringing plays a part in this. Whereas I feel those were relationships when I was single before we got into our commitment, I feel like they are private and personal and that it's awkward to talk about them in detail with him or anyone. That said, I've always shared openly and honestly when asked. I told him who, when, and the circumstances. I haven't always found it easy to recount, but I've done my best. He's done the same, though I don't feel I need to know the details or hear about them again. Tonight, he wanted to go over a one-time fling I had a long time ago. He says things don't add up. I told him about it in early 2022. He wanted to talk about it again early 2023, and now again in October 2023. I was fully happy to tell him about it in the first instance in 2022, and in the second instance, I was patient as the dialogue wasn't unhelpful or overly intrusive, though I was uncomfortable revisiting it. Tonight, he wanted to do it again. Over time, I've lost the details and am more unsure. That makes me anxious, like I'm going to fail some kind of test and not be able to satisfy what he needs. The fling was one night after a party and hardly a major event. Tonight, he expects me to recall exactly how I was thinking at the time and the name of the person. He said he's guessed who it was. I knew the name in 2022 and am almost 99% sure I told him. By now, I've forgotten it. Sorry, fling man. I know that's bad form, but it was a hedonistic single year and I didn't stay in touch with that person at all. My boyfriend won't tell me who he thinks it is, and I doubt he knows, as the fling man wasn't in contact and not on any of my social media. My boyfriend won't explain why he's asking again and what the purpose of making me recount it again is. He is acting like there's clearly something bigger to discover that for some reason I'm not telling him. He asked me to phone a friend from that time to ask them the name of the guy. I refused, not because my friend wouldn't help out, but because it would be hard to explain why and deeply embarrassing to even ask. He's gentle and sweet and I can tell he's struggling, but I can't recall those details, and I'm not sure why I should, even if I could. I became really cross because rightly or wrongly, it felt abusive to be asked again at this stage, added to the fact that he thinks I'm now withholding the name. He swears it's not jealousy. He does struggle with low self-esteem. Repeatedly asking you to recall details about a one-time fling from many years ago, despite your discomfort, can be seen as intrusive and unnecessary. It sounds like you've been open and honest with him about your past, and it's natural to not remember every specific detail after so much time has passed. On the other hand, it sounds like your boyfriend genuinely wants to process his feelings and overcome his low self-esteem. He may believe that discussing your past can help him gain insight into himself and your relationship. However, it's important for him to respect your boundaries and understand that your discomfort is valid. In order to resolve this issue, it's crucial for both of you to have an open and honest conversation about your concerns and expectations regarding discussing past relationships. You could express that you've already shared as much as you're comfortable with, and that repeatedly discussing certain details is causing anxiety and tension. It's also important for your boyfriend to communicate his motivations and what he hopes to achieve by revisiting these conversations. Ultimately, seeking couples therapy or relationship counseling could be beneficial for the two of you to address the underlying issues and find a mutually respectful resolution. Would I be the antagonist if I report my son's public school nurse? My son, who is 6 years old, came home from school last week on Friday with a broken collarbone. As soon as he got off the bus, it was clear that something was wrong. He was holding his shoulder and couldn't lift his arm without crying. His clavicle was purple and had a large lump on it. His father, who is 28 years old, and I, who am 27 years old, immediately took him to the emergency room where the broken collarbone was confirmed. We stayed there until late in the evening. My son told us that he tripped and did a flip over a large railroad tie that they used to border the playground, resulting in a hard fall on his shoulder. This happened around 2:10 p.m. and he arrived home at 3:30 p.m. I'm more upset about the lack of communication than the missed injury. Is it normal to expect a first-grade teacher with a classroom of over 20 kids to tend to an injury? When I was a child, my mom received phone calls whenever I was in the nurse's office, directly from the nurse herself. However, in this case, the nurse did not do so. The teacher did call and leave a voicemail on our home phone number, which she found on a piece of paper in her class. Additionally, the teacher sent a note home in my son's book bag. However, no one at the school attempted to contact us using the numbers they had on record, including the emergency contacts, who are both of his grandmothers, who are always available by phone. If they had contacted us, we would have been there immediately and taken him to the emergency room much sooner. The note the teacher sent home informed us that he fell at recess and had been upset about it since. The nurse explained over the phone today that the teacher was doing her a favor. This didn't make sense to me because I was not aware that it was common practice for a first-grade teacher to handle injuries when there is a nurse available in the building. However, my son didn't just fall. He actually did a full flip and cushioned the fall with his shoulder. His teacher did more to assess the injury than the nurse. She tried to see if he could raise his arm, inspected his shoulder, took the extra time to check in with the nurse at the end of the day, and even tried to comfort him with popsicles and fun activities. He said he cried throughout the whole ordeal. It wasn't until my son was already on his way home, after all the other kids had left the classroom, that the teacher finally managed to call my son's grandmother. I was in touch with her within seconds of them ending the call. Once again, I don't believe it should have been the teacher's responsibility. My son is feeling really upset about all of this, and I want to advocate for him and other children in the right way. It is important to note that I recently found out that my son is not the first child this has happened to with this particular school and nurse. I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing by wanting to report her or take things as far as possible. My parents would never have stood up for me in this situation, so I'm confused and unsure if I'm overreacting. Am I upset with the wrong person? I don't want to act inappropriately, so would I be considered in the wrong? It is concerning that the nurse did not contact you immediately, especially considering that it is a broken collarbone. Your son's well-being should be a top priority, and it seems like the school failed in properly addressing the situation. Reporting the incident and raising your concerns about the nurse's negligence is a reasonable course of action to ensure that this does not happen again to other children. Your son deserves to have his injuries taken seriously and be provided with appropriate medical care. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist in the description.